later on Indira Gandhi. And she traveled to India as often as possible, especially after Silone died in 1978.
Now, we said that somehow the U.S. government or the agencies did maybe help, or at least in the U.S. he was seen as a positive, had a positive image. But what did Silone have as an image of America? Did he have one?
Silone had, you know, in the 1930s and 40s and even into the 1950s, in Italy had America had a kind of dual reputation. On the one hand, for writers like Cesare Pavese and others, America was a land of freedom, literary freedom, sexual freedom, political freedom, cultural freedom. But for Silone, that wasn't the case. Silone had a more negative, a more nuanced image of America. He had been in contact with peasants who had left Italy, had emigrated to the United States, especially Abruzzese peasants, and oftentimes they wrote to him. So he was familiar with the idea that the United States may have been a land of opportunity, but there was a price to be paid for making your way into the middle class. Friendship oftentimes suffered, families oftentimes suffered, the social life oftentimes suffered. In fact, I've known people, friends of mine, who have come to the United States and to work, to live, to raise a family, and they have gone back to Italy because they found that yes, you can make a lot of money, you can make a nice career, but that's not everything in life.
His own father, he migrated.
His father left Italy, Abruzzo, in 1911 to go to Brazil, and as soon as he gets off the boat, he's confronted with this spectacle of workers striking and the police attacking them. And the police trying to convince the new Italians just off the boat to take their place at lower wages. So the father is so disgusted, he turns around, gets on the boat, and goes back to Italy.
So basically, he got a few lessons from his own father, especially with also new elections in little town. Yes. Yeah. So in a sense, he did not see much of great things of America, basically because he was a socialist. But he said at one point that the best democracy was not capitalism, but rather a socialistic democracy.
Right. I think he would have been more at home in the kind of democratic socialist countries like in Scandinavia, like Sweden, Switzerland, Norway, Finland. The United States intrigued him. But even Italy, after the Second World War, when you had the so-called economic boom of the 1950s and 60s, Silone said, look, it's not that I want the peasants to be poor all the time. We don't want that. But we have to understand that with the coming of affluence, there are other problems. He had this great expression, what he called the Sphinx of affluence, that with the introduction of a consumer culture, Italian culture was going to change radically. And he was one of the first people to see this, that, okay, it's nice that we all now have refrigerators and a Fiat and we go on vacation, but there's a price to be paid for that.
Yeah, we can see even today in our own...
Today, Italy is one of the most consumerist societies on earth.
Really?
Yes, I think so.
Anyway, so he saw America not in a positive light.
He saw America in a more nuanced light. That obviously there were great things in America, but he was not someone to believe in this kind of myth, this kind of mythical America.
Is there any comparison between Carlo Rosselli's philosophy of government and Ignazio Silone?
Well, you know, after a while, Silone began to realize.
They met.
I think they did meet, but more importantly is that Rosselli always thought that politics could offer a solution. Of course, he was assassinated tragically early in 1937, but Silone, the tragedy of Silone, I think, is that at a certain point he comes to realize that neither politics nor the Catholic Church could give him what he was looking for in life, this kind of sense of fulfillment or redemption. It's not that he rejected Christianity. He rejected the Catholic Church. He rejected the institution of the Church, but he still believed in what might be called a kind of simple Christianity. And the same thing with politics, that official politics, political parties probably could not give us the solutions that we were looking for in life. And that's why I think in the end, Silone is sort of like a tragic figure.
He writes a letter before he dies about the church, which was basically
Critical of
the church. He
Right.
believes in Christ, but
Right.
in the beginning he did not even believe in Christ.
Yeah.
The fact of religion, which in the very beginning, when he was poor, homeless, orphan, it was basically the church that helped him. He was in a seminary, he studied in a seminary. And thereafter, both the brothers were against the church. Something could have happened that they were so adamantly against.
Well, it is true that after the earthquake, Silone went to these Catholic schools, and he was tremendously influenced by Luigi Orione, who just recently became a saint. He was canonized by the Catholic Church for his work.
He has become a saint?
He has become a saint, yes. But I think what happened is, like, for example, Silone says this, in the middle of the First World War, while millions of men were dying at the front, while countries like Russia were going through revolutions, while there were all of these political and ethical problems, you would go to church, and what were the priests talking about? They were talking about the scandals of women's bathing suits, or the scandal of children cursing. And Silone says, how could you remain in a church like this, that is blind to the real serious moral problems of the time, and is concerned with things like sexuality and bathing suits and cursing, while millions of people are getting killed around the world?
His writing is not, doesn't show obscene, it doesn't have obscene languages or obscene...
And there's no eroticism in Silone. In one or two short stories when he was younger, he experimented with surrealism, with erotic scenes, but when he became a real writer, and it's one of the reasons why the Italians talk about a caso Silone, the Silone case, that why is it that Silone was never really recognized as a great writer in Italy? It's because, like, after the Second World War, the writers who were popular were people like Alberto Moravia, Elsa Morante, who wrote certain things about psychological problems and sexuality, which Silone was not interested in.
There is also a possibility, well, accusation sometimes that he may be misanthrope.
A misanthrope, yes. That there are these examples that when he's like at dinner with people like Arthur Koestler or other people who come away saying, what's wrong with that guy? You know, he's not very open, he's not very friendly. We went to the restaurant and he spent the whole time, you know, being quiet, or he just spoke to his wife. You know.
So he was not an eloquent person, he did not speak much.
No.
He was a sick, ill person.
He was sick much of his life, yes. And eventually, towards the end of his life, he is misdiagnosed by his doctors. He has a kidney disease, which eventually kills him. And